Hello, Acton. I'm Greg Jarbo, and I'm with the Acton Democratic Town Committee, and you're going to think, whoa, time out. Aren't we going to be talking about town meeting? Isn't that nonpartisan? And the answer is yes, it is. It is. But sort of the Red Sox are nonpartisan too. You can have a point of view, and you can be a passionate advocate of it, and by the way, still try to stick to the facts. If you're a Yankees fan, you'll know what I mean. Get over it. Okay, now, we're going to start with some of the things that you will not find in the printed literature. You should read it. These are facts. That's good stuff. But it turns out the facts are numbers. The facts say, oh, by the way, the Acton Boxborough Regional School System is going to cut 34 full-time equivalents in the next, well, they're actually only cutting 13 this year because they cut the rest last year, but 34 over 2 years, those are people. So we want to talk to the people who may have to be dealing with the actual consequences of these numbers. And with me tonight are Mike and Leela, and I'll tell you what, I apologize. Mike, you may want to pronounce your last name because I can't.
That's fair enough, Mike Balulescu.
Exactly. I'm glad you got that right. And Leela?
Leela Ramachandran.
Exactly. So there you have it. And now, one other thing, by the way. If you want, there is a chat feature. And if you go to actondems.org, you can go to the YouTube and watch this live and chat and ask us questions. Or you can go to Zoom. That also works. And we'd love to have you participate. But let me start. Mike.
Yes.
It turns out, I think town meeting is full of drama. It's better than Netflix. The things that happen there are just surprising. But you don't see it if you're not there. And that can have political consequences that impact people. So you have an anecdote you want to share from last year's town meeting about what happens if you don't show up.
Yes, so I certainly want to encourage everyone to come to town meeting this year and vote yes on Article 7, which is the school budget. And here's the reason. I was there last year, and last year the school budget, as it always is, was up for approval. And within the last few days before town meeting, a small group of citizens put an amendment up at town meeting, and it went to the floor to reduce the budget by $1.25 million more. And I say more because the budget last year, as it is this year, in my opinion, is already pretty austere, already represents some pretty painful cuts to meet financial realities. And these citizens wanted to reduce it by a significant sum, $1.25 million in a bare bones budget. That's a lot of jobs, that's a lot of teachers, that's a lot of pain. And because there were so few people at town meeting, it just barely was rejected. The amendment did not pass, but just barely. If 29 more people in the audience at town meeting participating had decided to vote yes, we might have faced another terrible round of staff cuts.
And so, that was after the 20 positions had been eliminated last year before there's 13 more being eliminated this year.
Yes.
So picking a number out of the hat and saying, oh, I know, let's just cut budgets because cutting budgets is cool or popular or trendy or, you know, I want to cut the budget. You know, whatever it is, it's your motivation. It's just, you know, some people have the power at town meeting to file amendments. Now, Leela.
Yep.
What impact does that have on the students?
Yeah, it's hard. I was at AB and one of my favorite teachers, Miss Hammond, she really is part of the reason I'm here right now. And she is one of the teachers who's going to be cut. And she knows students by their first and last name. She knows about their families. She knows how they're doing. She knows what they want to do. And so we're losing some teachers, some educators who really care about students, who know them. Students feel like they have a trusted adult in the building. And I work in public health, and we know that having trusted adults means that it's a protective factor for students. So.
By the way, I forgot to say congratulations. You just got elected.
Thank you.
Last
I
night?
appreciate it. Yeah. It's
Wow.
exciting. Yeah.
And so by a landslide? Well, landslide Leela, how's that? Does that work for you?
I'll take it, Greg.
You'll take it. Okay. All right. Now, so let's go back to the town meeting starts Monday night. And although you can register to get in around 6, it probably won't get underway until 7.
Correct.
There's going to be some preliminary things that the town will deal with. The town moderator will explain that. There will be a consent warrant. In other words, things that won't be controversial. People will agree that's not controversial. It'll get passed. But then normally when we get to the school budget, drama ensues. So about what time of night is that likely to hit, and how do we get people to get a babysitter? How do we get people to attend? If I mean, they all have lives.
Yeah, it's a good question, Greg. I mean, to deal with the first part of the question, the school budget is Article 7. In my experience attending town meeting, the school budget usually comes up around 8:30. On the first night, it really depends on a number of things. From my perspective, because as an educator in the district, as the president of the teachers union, I think that's the most important thing happening at town meeting. I know there's a lot of important things, but supporting the school budget to me is a way to support the work of our teachers and to support our students in a town where so many of us consider the school system to be really the lifeblood of what brings people to Acton and what builds community here. So I think it's critically important. Now, to your question about babysitters, there's no question that town meeting is inaccessible in some ways, especially for busy working parents who on a school night are going to struggle to find childcare. I get it. I'm the parent of 2 5th graders. I've been in Acton here for almost 10 years. For many years, my wife and I would trade off. I would go to town meeting or she would go to town meeting. If we were able to get a babysitter, we'd go together. And so I guess my suggestion, if people are struggling with childcare, is to say that sending one registered voter to town meeting is better than none. Or, if you can bring 2 or you can bring some adult children, that's great. But the struggle is real. I can't babysit because I'm going to be there. So,
but I also think that there is an overflow room in the gym, and so if you want to come with children, I know it gets a little late sometimes, but you could bring children and sit in the gym if that's easier.
Now, any registered voter in the town of Acton can turn up.
Mm-hmm.
Can any registered voter in the town of Acton speak on this article?
Absolutely. There are microphones all throughout the high school auditorium as well as the overflow room. And in order to speak, all you have to do is get in line and step up to the mic and say who you are and where you live. And then you get 2 or 3 minutes. I forget exactly how much, but you get your mic time to speak your mind. And I think for all of the possible criticisms of town meeting and the way that it can be inaccessible, it can be difficult, certainly one of the hallmarks and highlights of town meeting is that everyone has a chance to have their say. And to the drama you spoke of, certainly as a voter and as someone who is into politics and cares deeply about the town, that there is sometimes some entertainment value in what you hear. Some very authentic and meaningful and heartfelt comments, some good jokes, some not so good jokes, and certainly some drama in between. So I can't pitch town meeting strictly for its entertainment value. I think it's an important civic duty, and as a teacher, there's few things you can do more to support me than making sure that the budget passes. But hearing that engagement and hearing people speak is certainly a unique part of politics in Acton.
Now, Leela, you've just been campaigning, so obviously there are lots of other issues that surfaced. Anything else that you think is going to come and impact the budget discussion?
Well, teachers getting cut for sure. I think that generally, though, like, students are still struggling with their mental health. They're still needing support in a variety of ways.
Now, is this post-COVID, or is it something else?
Coming out of the height of COVID, I think students have always struggled a little bit with mental health and needing some additional support. And everyone has been through a lot. And so I think that part of the budget is also making sure that there are counselors funded, that there are all these other supports for students.
So this is a big one. Now, let me just play devil's advocate for half a second. Not that I'm a Yankees fan.
Thanks for clarifying.
Yeah, I'm not that far gone. One of the things that we see time and again, at least I've seen over the last 40 years, is that people will elect, good people for the school committee and then not go to town meeting. And because of Prop 2.5, because a small minority can use the leverage of you don't want an override, do you? That gives them undue weight, and they use it by turning up at town meeting, where a smaller number of people will turn out and basically undo some of the good stuff that was people thought they had done by casting their ballot. So do you really have to hang in there until the last inning because you never know what they're going to pull?
I mean, what I would say is that, Greg, absolutely, anyone who cares about education in Acton, anyone who considers themselves a pro-education voter, anyone who wants to support students and support teachers in their work with students, if they are able, should come to town meeting and stick around to vote yes on Article 7 for the school budget. Because as you said, as much work as I as a classroom teacher put in to try to meet the needs of my students, as much work as the school committee, and Leela's going to join the school committee soon, as much work as the school committee puts in to support the work of teachers and to support students, ultimately, whether or not that budget passes is determined by the voters that happen to show up at town meeting. And so even if there is a pro-majority voting bloc in town, which I absolutely believe that there is, that doesn't matter. What matters is who is at town meeting pushing the clickers and voting yes. And so I really hope that there's a huge turnout for people to support the school budget. But after what I saw last year, I'm going to say that number again, 29 votes, and we would have had an approved amendment to cut $1.25 million, would have triggered special town meetings. I'm certain that had that vote gone the other way, that would have resulted in more teachers losing their jobs, more staff members losing their jobs. So I believe in the voters in this town. I believe in this school district, but we have to show up and make that preference and make that support of the school system known.
So, Leela, how do you convince somebody who may not have students in the school system today that voting for the school budget actually is a good thing no matter what kind of childhood demographic you don't have? And yeah, I mean, if you don't have kids, that's okay. I don't have kids anymore. They went through the Acton school system, but that was like 15 to 20 years ago. So I'm one of those people who, quote, doesn't have children, but sure. I'm supporting the schools. What argument can you make to help convince people who might be in that boat?
Sure. I think a lot of people move to Acton for the school district. So even if your kids have graduated out, you benefited from the schools, and you still do, because people still keep coming to Acton for the schools. I think if you are my age and you don't have kids in the school, but you just know that the schools are valuable, that they're an integral part of our community, you would vote yes to, just like I do and I intend to. Schools, educators, children are kind of the future, especially the children. And so I hope that we're investing in our future. I hope that we're voting yes on the budget.
Cool. Well, that gives you a flavor of the opening night of town meeting. That's Monday. But there's going to be a lot of reasons why you may want to, focus on what comes next. So I want to thank my two guests, Mike and Leela, whose last names
We'll work on it.
I'll work on it. I'll work on it. Is it on the exam?
It is not.
Oh, okay. I'm relieved then. Thank you for participating, and hopefully it gave you a sense of, why you should read up on this, why you should go to Acton TV and watch the videos that they've uploaded, why you should, ask us some comments on Zoom. This is important. This is something that all of us need to step up and do. So with that, I want to thank you.
Thank you, Greg.
For your time.
Thanks for having us.
And your participation. And we'll see you again on Monday. And at this point, we're going to sort of change things out. Okay? I know, this isn't like perfectly choreographed, but it's approximately choreographed. And one of the things that we're going to focus on then is what's likely to turn up on the second night of town meeting. Now, the second night of town meeting, how do I say this? If it's hard to turn out an audience for opening night, second night is even harder. But the second night of town meeting is going to be dealing with a lot of really interesting issues. And those issues are in the form of warrant articles, and different citizens have put them together. And one of those articles, believe it or not, is going to be asking the town to vote on a non-binding referendum. It's an expression of the town's will, but what it could turn into is a request to the state legislature for permission to enable 16-year-olds to register to vote in town elections, and if and when that home rule petition passes in the legislature, then they could participate in town elections. Now this is sort of a different idea, and while we're getting Ty mic'd up here, Ty, why don't you introduce yourself?
Well, I'm Ty Sayahi. I'm a junior at the local high school.
So, how old are you?
17.
So you're not 18, you're not old enough to vote today, but if this passed, well, let's put it this way, would you be voting in town elections?
For sure. I think voting is one of the most important civic duties one can do, so. That's
pretty phenomenal. Now, I'm old enough to remember when they lowered the voting age from 21 to 18. In fact, I just turned 20 when they lowered the voting age to 18. So I wondered whether I had sort of missed a year or an election cycle in there. But there was a lot of debate back then as to whether, letting 18-year-olds vote was, going to unleash pandemonium, or, did they really know what they were doing, and et cetera, et cetera. What do you do to the skeptical voter who says, why would I want to let 16-year-olds vote?
I feel like I know that there are many 16-year-olds who genuinely do take an interest in local laws, elections, just politics in general. And I feel like 18 is a difficult age for one to become a voter, because that's the age that you're just going off to college. You have a new address, you're living in a new town, maybe even state. So it's extremely hard to register as a voter, much less actually get out and vote. So 16 is a great age because there are so many people who are involved and who wish to participate in their local community.
So you're here participating, and if we get any questions, we'll be happy to take them. But how do your classmates, are they into this? Is this something that is talked about at school?
Yeah. I'm from the High School Democrats Club, so obviously we do talk about it there. But there are many of my classmates, even in English class, for example, who do take an interest in politics and who do really want to make a difference. Even at our local school, we've had a lot of movements regarding recent course leveling changes, things like that.
So participating in the system sort of feels like you're ready to step up, and you've got a sort of skin in the game. These issues do impact you, don't they?
For sure. They're the laws that are already do affect us, but I feel like we're suddenly thrown in at 18 to so many different things. You're suddenly an adult, you suddenly have so much more responsibility. I feel like easing into it by allowing one to participate in their community a few years beforehand would definitely make the transition a lot easier.
Now, I understand that this is not just happening in Acton, that there are other towns around not only Massachusetts, but around the country that are also taking a look at, lowering the voting age to 16. Do you think this is a trend that goes beyond this town?
For sure. We see increasing numbers of towns around Acton and even throughout the country constantly, well, not constantly, sorry, that are attempting to decrease the voting age. It's a great movement that we see sweeping throughout the entire nation, along with many other things, such as ranked choice voting. So it's definitely not a localized thing.
Yeah. So this is bigger than a bread box, as my mother would used to say. Okay, so let's say you're at town meeting. Let's say, oh my gosh, magic happens. The legislature enacts this. You get to vote. What are the kinds of things that you think young people, what voice would they bring to town meeting? What kinds of concerns do you think would surface in the local election?
From what I've heard from other people, violence in our communities is something that people care quite a bit about, whether through guns or otherwise. Education reform, that's something many people support. There's even just the environment as a whole. It affects us more so than previous generations because that's what we're going to be stepping into. So these issues are what affects us the most. So it, only really makes sense for us to be the ones deciding on them.
Yeah. Well, I remember the argument that we used way back in my day was if we were old enough to die in Vietnam, we should be old enough to vote. So, it was we had to play that kind of card in order to put pressure back in the late 60s and early 70s of the previous century. Yeah, I know. I'm that old. So, what kind of argument do you think might resonate this year? Are you going through duck and cover drills or evacuation drills? I mean, what is happening? Do you think that might make this resonate for people?
Well, earlier this year, we haven't had duck and cover drills that I recall, but we had a 2-hour lockdown because of a threat made against our school that required numerous students' homes to be searched, their cars. It was a scary experience, especially for our families, because they weren't sure of what was going on. So they knew that something was up, but it was a scary experience all around, and I feel like that would definitely resonate with students.
So they'd say, hey, I'm on the front line. I deserve a vote. I have a stake in what happens in this community because, among other things, schools are targets. Anything else?
I can't really think of anything other than the environment, honestly. There hasn't been a major event in Acton alone that I know of, but then again, I haven't been here long, so.
Well, here, then I'll share one with you. 40 years ago, when I got elected to the Acton Select Board, it was because a company called W.R. Grace, which was located in South Acton, had contaminated 2 of the 5 wells in the town with really exotic chemicals like 1,1-dichloroethylene. And the select board was slow to act because W.R. Grace was our biggest taxpayer. And so a group of, well, I was younger then, obviously, group got together called the Acton Citizens for Environmental Safety, and we ran candidates to basically say, we've got to deal with the environmental issue here in town. We ended up suing Grace, winning in federal court, and that's why they were under a 30-year consent decree to clean up the aquifers. There was just no doubt that the exotic chemicals in the town's drinking water, you know, where they came from, they had their fingerprints all over them. So yeah, and that was a long time ago, and hopefully that is in the rearview mirror. But the environment is still a pretty important issue for a lot of people here in town. So I didn't mean to, you know, trump your ace or whatever. One other thing about the 16-year-old vote. Are people going to be concerned that, you know, younger people are going to tilt one way or another, and therefore, you know, I'm against it because they're not going to vote like me, you know, or whatever? Do you think there's some of that resistance?
I feel like that is definitely one of the factors that has resistance for many people, but in just 2 years, the people who are going to be given voting rights for this are going to end up voting anyway. It only makes sense to encourage more voter turnout now, things like that, in order to make sure that future generations have a say, because everyone always has different concerns. So no matter what, you're going to vote differently than previous generations.
My kids vote differently than I do, so yeah, that happens. Okay. Well, Ty, thank you for coming. I appreciate it. We're now going to go through the switcheroo one more time. But thank you very much. Appreciate it. And I now have to speak to the camera. This is where we covered the transitions. So there are a couple other warrant articles that we want to focus on tonight. And interestingly enough, both of these warrant articles are going to require state legislation. And this is something that happens a lot across the Commonwealth, where it's called home rule, and we need to indicate in Acton that we want something, and then we take it to our state senator, Jamie Eldridge, who, do you need an introduction?
I always like an introduction, thank you.
Oh, okay. Well, let me tell you about Jamie. In case you haven't noticed, he was on the front page of the Boston Sunday Globe. So congratulations.
Yes, thank you.
I'm reading my paper, and it's like, I know this guy. But anyway, so we're going to talk a little bit about Acton local politics, but Acton local politics actually gets caught up in some of the things that you're working on at the state level.
Absolutely, and I would say that, you know, as often the case, Acton is actually leading on issues that leads to legislation that we file. And, you know, one of the things I think we're going to discuss is around the banning fossil fuel infrastructure that came from home rule petition by Acton, and then former Rep. Tammy Gouveia and I filed the bill last session, and it became law.
Cool.
Yeah.
So now we have to take that next step, though. And why are there so many steps?
I know. Well, this, you know, part of it is the home rule tradition, for better or worse, in Massachusetts, where, you know, there's the home rule petition effort, which is what Acton tried last year. It did not become law. So then we established this reform in the climate change law and allowed 10 communities to be part of a pilot program to go all electric. And so the standard was that if a town or city had filed a home rule petition, it was prioritized. But of course, now Acton, if the Acton voters so wish, have to pass at a town meeting in order to be one of those 10 communities.
So we actually have to adjust what we had asked for to fit what the new standards are so that we can qualify to be in this pilot project.
Exactly, yep. The 10 community pilot program that was part of an act driving offshore wind and clean energy forward.
So the basic argument then is that if we can require, what, electricity as opposed to fossil fuels You can get your electricity from solar or wind or, basically renewable sources. We should require that.
Yeah, I mean, it's really about the infrastructure, right? It's moving towards saying, first of all new development shall not include fossil fuel infrastructure. So it should not have the gas pipes going to a new development or a new public building. That should all be electric. And then how do we move our current fossil fuel infrastructure so that everything is electrified?
Well, part of the reason you were in the Globe Sunday was because it turns out there's an inordinate number of legislators who, are landlords or...
Not too many, but more than I think than it was expected.
So,
Yes.
so are there hidden fossil fuel advocates? In other words, what are the odds of this actually happening at the state legislature?
I think, as far as, what Acton wants to do, it's already set. It just it has to pass by the voters. As far as taking the next steps towards how do we electrify everything, I think a lot of it is getting over that doubt, which is really based on sort of myths and fears that we somehow can't do it, or there'll be blackouts or brownouts in the winter or in the summer where we need AC or extra heat. But actually, it's possible. We do need to upgrade the grid to get there. So we need to invest more in the grid. But it's possible, and we're seeing homes that are completely electrified with heat pumps and solar and geothermal and improving the envelope of the house that they don't need fossil fuel infrastructure. So it's happening now.
Cool.
Yeah.
Now there's another article.
Yes. Heard just a little bit about this one.
Oh, I think
I
I saw you in the Globe about that one too. So I think this issue started in Littleton.
It did. Yes, in Littleton, and actually, I must confess, the Boston Globe really discovered it before I did. But a fairly old mill right at the Littleton Common by 495, where there are actually 86 licensed gun dealers. It's actually the densest concentration of licensed gun dealers in the entire country. So you think about all the states where usually gun ownership is sort of encouraged or there's not as much gun control. The highest concentration is in not only Massachusetts, but in Littleton, Massachusetts. And many of my constituents in Littleton were outraged and shocked and asked for a bylaw to, in the future, limit that. And as a result of what's happening in Littleton, which actually a bylaw has already passed, now towns like Acton, which are seeing some of those dealers now apply to move to, say, Acton or Westford or Ayer. And so then this firearm business regulatory bylaw is being proposed at town meeting.
So if it fails at town meeting, we basically can't stop anybody from setting up shop in any industrial park or shopping center or you name it in the town. So it seems counterintuitive to say we need to give approval for one or two places in Acton where it's legal if basically I know a lot of people in Acton would say, do we have to let this happen at all? So
Right.
how does that work?
Well, because, whether or not we agree with the Supreme Court's interpretation or the federal government's interpretation of the Second Amendment, at least the majority of the Supreme Court sees the Second Amendment as being a right to bear arms, and therefore being a licensed gun dealer is legal. Obviously, the dealer have to follow all the rules and laws, and I think the vast majority do. But because it is a legal business, we can regulate where they're located, which is what the bylaw proposes at Acton Town Meeting, not being within a certain number of feet of a place of worship or a school or a daycare center, and limiting the number that are perhaps in a building, and therefore to severely limit the number of dealers.
So if we got to have it happen one way or another, better to locate it in places that are less vulnerable.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yep. Exactly. Or it's possible that there will be none because the regulations, while reasonable, also prevent any from coming to Acton, which is
Now,
possible.
aren't there also some additional safeguards based on what we learned in Littleton about subleases and all that shenanigans?
Yeah, there absolutely are, because I will say, you know, people say, why are there so many dealers in this one building in Littleton? It's because not only the owner of that mill was welcoming to those businesses, but, you know, I think some of the other gun dealers, perhaps understandably, were offering subleases to other dealers. So there's a further restrictions in the Acton proposal.
So you could buy one gun part from one guy and another gun part from another guy. You go to a third guy and he'd assembled it into your assault-style weapon, right? Or was that sort of what was going on?
Yes, that was. Although in the case of when I went through the mill in Littleton, it was actually just one dealer saying that they would sell me all the parts and then I could put it together later. So that's actually state law that needs to be addressed, and I filed the state bill to ban so-called ghost guns that are guns that are very similar to an AR-15 or other assault weapon that's already banned in Massachusetts, because it's slightly different, some dealers feel they can sell them.
Now, this is likely to be a hot issue on the second night of town meeting. And a lot of people will think, oh, I did my civic duty. I went on the first night. I don't really have to turn up on the second night, do I? But if they do, what would a low turnout do for this kind of issue?
Yeah, and I think that's a really important point, Greg, because actually at the Littleton town meeting in February, the proposed bylaw around regulating firearms businesses barely passed. So even though there was a fairly organized group of individuals, you know, supporting it, there was clearly those on the other side organizing too, and it barely passed.
So people really will need to get a babysitter 2 nights, at least?
I would say so. I would say so, and I want to be clear that there already are dealers that are inquiring in Acton Town Hall about moving to Acton.
So this isn't hypothetical. This is your last chance to sort of check in on this issue.
Exactly. Yep. And I've talked to Acton Town Manager John Mangiarotti to confirm that.
Okay. So there you have it. This is important stuff. This town meeting, yeah. There can be the town characters and there can be the moments of levity, but this is also sort of life and death. This is an important issue. So
yeah.
Anything else while you're here that you want to update us on, I don't know, local aid, or anything else that you want to share?
Well, I think I would just say, you know, really paying tribute to Acton's leadership, which obviously you think about the illegal town meetings that Acton had, obviously, you know, pre-revolution, is that so many of the issues that Acton leads on, you know, the plastic bag ban, where I now file the statewide ban. Other bills around limiting gas stoves in homes. I mean, a lot of that banning styrofoam and polystyrene from businesses. A lot of that came from home rule petitions that actually passed at Acton Town meeting. So it's something that really pushes me to be bolder up on Beacon Hill.
Cool. Well, there you have it. And guess what? Turn out for town meeting next week, and we can do a little more pushing. This obviously is going to run into some resistance in the state legislature, I assume.
Which proposal?
Any one of them. I mean, getting Acton to vote for something doesn't guarantee the state legislature will also follow suit, right?
Right, but both the firearms bylaw and the fossil fuel infrastructure ban are strictly, if they pass a town meeting, they become law.
Better and better. Cool. Yep. All right. Well, thank you, State Senator Jamie Eldridge. And we will now transition one more time. We've got one more issue. And the final issue that we want to deal with tonight is one that, well, let's put it this way. If you're a nerd, you'll get it, okay? Now, my mother was a math teacher, so I get it. But I understand that the whole concept of rank, choice, voting, let's put it this way. I saw the video that you made. It's posted on the Acton TV YouTube channel. Watch it. It's got a really good explanation of how it works, but you were using candy?
I was, although I was informed that I made a mistake initially and my words talked about ice cream, even though the graphics were about candy. But it works either way, and it works even better for candidates.
This is Sam, by the way. In row, and I should have introduced you right off. Okay, so I leapt to the candy row. What else did I miss?
Stella.
Stella.
Stella Co.
Stella Co. Stella. What else have I missed?
About the ranked choice voting?
Yeah.
Why we should do it?
Yeah.
Well, 60% of us voted for it in 2020.
Wait. Acton's already voted for this?
Yes. It was a statewide initiative, and the town of Acton voted to pass it. We could have used it in our elections that we just had yesterday, right? We could have had, you could have ranked your choices. And
instead of having to wrestle with, I had 4 candidates I really liked, but I could only vote for 3. Then there were 2 I didn't want, but how do I split my vote?
Yeah, I actually didn't use my entire ballot, which I felt terribly about, because on some of the elections, you know, in some of them there were 2 or 3 candidates that were there, and I felt strongly about some, and then on others it was kind of a close question. I liked a few of them, and then there were others that I disagreed with, and you know, that can go in any number of directions. But with the current system, it's called first past the post. It's the standard system that we're all used to. Whoever gets the most votes wins. And it sounds incredibly logical until you realize that whoever gets the most votes doesn't mean that they actually win most of the people. They just win, and if there's many candidates, they can get a plurality or more than anybody else, but still less than a majority. And it happens fairly often that the majority actually prefers somebody else. And then there's various ways that that the election results end up not reflecting the will of the people. One of the most common that we hear all the time is spoiler candidates. If there's a race where maybe you really like one candidate, but they don't really have a great shot of winning, you may prefer that they don't even run, or if they do run, that you encourage people not to vote for them and you don't vote for them yourselves, because there's another candidate who you also are okay with, even if they're not your favorite, but that candidate is more likely to win if you vote for them, and then there's somebody else who you really don't want. You see that if there's when there's multiple candidates that are similar, they end up splitting up the vote. So a candidate that people are less happy with is more likely to win.
So let's walk our viewers. Yes, you should go see the candy.
I should have brought candy bars with me.
Yeah. But explain it to our viewers to give them a reason to go see the candy explanation.
Sure. What that explanation shows is, let's say there are 4 different, in the candies, to use the example, M&M's, Reese's Peanut Butter Cups, which is my personal favorite.
But Reese's lost.
Reese's did lose. I think that vote may have been rigged. But you know, it is genuinely my personal favorite. But M&M's, Reese's, Hershey's, and I forget what the 4th one was, but there are 4 different candy bars, and one of them had, M&M's had the most votes, but not enough to win. And the way it works in ranked choice voting, let's use a simpler example that I can remember.
Okay.
There's 4 candidates, A, B, C, and D. Candidate C has the least votes of all of them. People really like candidate C, but they also kind of like, people who like candidate C, also some of them like candidate A, some of them like candidate B. Candidate C is really different from D, so people generally are opposed to D if they like C. Well, if C has the fewest votes, then we just remove C from the election, and we go to the second choice for those voters, and we count their vote for the second choice. So they don't have to worry about supporting C and be worried that D is going to win, because if C doesn't get enough support, their vote then counts for their next choice. So their votes go to A or B. And then we just do the same process again. We now have Those second choice votes now count as if they were first choice votes for A and some for B. And let's say that now bumps A up a little higher. D is still maybe in the lead. Maybe A, B, and C are all kind of similar, and D is very different. So D is still kind of in the lead. Well, now if B has the lowest vote total, eliminate B. All the candidates who are voting for B at this point, we remove those votes, and the next choice down their list, either their second or third choice, whatever their next choice is, counts for those. Those candidates like A the best. So we may have had 3 candidates that were very similar, and under first past the post, a fourth candidate who's very different and people don't tend to favor as much would have won, but we don't have to worry about those candidates splitting their vote. If you just rank your first, second, third, and fourth choice, and you don't need to go all the way down the ballot, rank as many as you want to, but you rank the choices that you have, and that allows for what's called an instant runoff between the different candidates until we get down to one that is the most favored by the electorate.
Wow, wow. And Stella, they're actually doing this in different parts of the world.
They are. Maine does it for their federal elections.
Maine does it already.
For their federal elections.
For
So
the
we're
federal.
talking about just for our town elections.
And Alaska does
Alaska
it.
as well.
Alaska does it, that's
In
right.
fact, they just did it, didn't
They
they,
did.
in the last round of the elections? And are there any? Well, there's at least a city in Massachusetts that's been doing this since 1948.
For 70 years now. No, 40. I know it's been 70 years. So I think 50. I think
It's a long time.
I remember it's 70 years. I think it's been since 53.
Oh, okay.
I think.
So that's Cambridge, right?
Mm-hmm.
But so why Acton? Why should we be out in front on ranked choice voting? I mean, we're out in front on everything, aren't we?
That's a good thing.
Oh, that's a good thing. Okay.
So I just think that things are kind of divisive now. And I think, we're lucky that I think our candidates in this last election were all wasn't really contentious in that way. But when you have an election where candidates can kind of snipe at each other or not be very cordial, with ranked choice voting, they know they're courting more than one voter, right? More than, like,
In
I
other
want
words,
to be
if
your second choice.
I can't
or
get your first vote,
Yeah.
but could I be your second choice?
Exactly.
And we have seen that in examples of real ranked choice votings in cities in America where candidates have run kind of together and said, we each want to be your first choice vote, but we each think you should vote for this other person second. If they were similar candidates, they didn't have to compete. They didn't have to argue about who should run and who should stay home. They could both run. And instead of having someone with not enough of a voice, they could work together and increase their volume and get their word out better.
Now, one of the challenges that ranked choice voting faces, I think, is the fact that we don't have what I would call local newspapers to explain it to people. We don't have, somehow or other there needs to be a sort of an education process to say, this is how it works, this is what it's going to do. So is that one of the reasons why there was a sort of a 2-year phase in?
So yeah, it doesn't start right away for the 2024 elections. It would start in 2025 if we get the state legislature to vote for a home rule petition. It would take longer if the state doesn't vote for that right away. And that would give us time to learn the new system. The new system is also not terribly complicated. It's hard to explain the math. It's not hard to do the math, and that math is done by the computer system. It can also be done by hand by both the town clerk as well as any of the candidates who want to check and make sure, if they don't trust the computer system. I don't blame people for not trusting computers. The more I know about them, the less I trust them. But the full ballots are released. You can do the math yourself. It's not that hard to do once you know how. And the actual process of voting in a ranked choice system is also not that complicated. You just get a ballot that lists multiple choices. You rank as many as you want. Our current voting machines that we purchased a few years ago are already capable of handling it. Just like they do right now, if you make a mistake on your ballot, the machine will spit out your ballot and warn you of the mistake to give you a chance to correct it. It would do the same thing with ranked choice voting. If there's a mistake on the ballot, it will spit out the ballot so that you can correct the mistake. And the actual process is really not any more difficult than the current process. It just feels like it is because it's new and people haven't done it, and explaining the math to people can get a little bit complicated.
Okay, so this is going to be on the second night of town
Yes.
meeting. So there are multiple reasons to come to town meeting, not one, but 2 nights, because, you should vote for the school budget, please.
Absolutely.
And then you're going to have things like the gun business bylaw, you're going to have the energy infrastructure, you're going to have voting on whether to lower the voting age to 16 and ranked choice voting. Should we be charging tuition to this town meeting? Because this sounds like a graduate level course.
I mean, there are many things that could be said about the various pros and cons. And I know Mike talked about this a little bit, and he and I talk about this quite a bit. There are things that could be said pro and con with the town meeting system, in terms of whether it's better to have representatives who study these issues or not. But regardless, it's incredibly exciting to get the chance as a town to come together and talk about these things. And it is incredibly important to know, one of the drawbacks of town meeting is that the issues are decided by the ones who show up. So if you care about these issues, even if you think that the issue you care about is very popular, that doesn't necessarily mean it'll be very popular in the room on the day. So it is incredibly important to show up on both nights. It can be very difficult. I have twins at home who are 11 years old, and that absolutely makes things challenging. And I totally understand that, and that is one of the big drawbacks of town meeting. But I'm going to be there, and I'm going to vote for the things that we've talked about here today. And it's important for everybody to do everything they can to make sure that they're able to be there too.
So if someone wants to read up on this, this is in the warrant article. It's what, article number?
35.
35, which you will find back on page 73.
Yeah, pretty close to the end.
All right, I know.
It will be coming up for a vote late on the second night.
It's on the midterm exam. You better study up on this stuff. Okay, all right. Now, any other reasons that you think people should really, really, really go to town meeting this year? Anything else percolating?
This affects our lives.
Mm-hmm.
So
it's our community.
It's our community. We're invested in it, so we should do our very best to participate in its governance.
Cool.
Yeah, I want to point out the Acton TV YouTube page has a playlist of videos that explain a number of the town warrant articles, including several of the ones we talked about today. Ranked choice voting, the 2 that Senator Eldridge was just talking about, are also explained on there. The reason why we had this separate event tonight to talk about it is because that's more nonpartisan, and we are able to advocate a little bit more.
That's right. That's right. There are ESPN sportscasters who will talk about baseball, but they won't talk about it the way a Red Sox fan would, right? I'm trying to sell.
I grew up in New York City, so I'm going to refrain from...
This is the Yankees fan I was talking about earlier. Okay. See, they're out there. They're out there. They're all over. Okay. So with that in mind, I think we have covered a wide swath of issues. And now it's just time to do your homework and get ready to go to town meeting.
Invite your friends.
Bring your friends. Get a babysitter if you have to. You know what? This is important. There's a reason why we have this right, and people fought for it, and it's important. So, on a serious note, attend town meeting. This is pure democracy, and again, I will argue, better than anything you can watch on Netflix. And with that, thank you very much. This, by the way, has been a live stream but it will also then be archived on actondems.org and also on Acton TV. So if you want to let your neighbors know, if they didn't tune in live, that's okay. You have several days. Let them know about it, and hopefully it will stir some interest. Hopefully, you will walk into town meeting knowing that there's a reason to be there.
Thank you.
Thank you. And I think that's a wrap.